Hi, welcome back to the Dylan Rounds case. Welcome if you're currently here in the live chat. Today we are doing a map analysis theory-based video, okay? Before I do continue, if you haven't already, I did upload a miniature video this morning. I know, kind of a surprise, a short video, bit odd, but yeah, it was heavily focusing on an interesting finding, arguably suspicious, of a white van within Lucin, and it may be owned by one of the individuals within the case. If you want to know more about it or you want to join the discussion, make sure to watch that video after watching this. There'll be a link provided down below in the comment section, pinned message, okay? So for this video, as we go along, you can share your thoughts, opinions and reactions. Understandably, this video might not sit as well as if it was uploaded earlier because of the way, you can't really say progression, but the way thoughts have transitioned. But then again, one of those things where previous videos, not everyone would have agreed with those points. So by making this video, this alternative point of view, it might relate to more people, or it might relate to other people that dismissed the previous suggestions. Okay, so that's how we're going to be doing it. Now, map analysis, it's linking back to the phone pings with Dylan and only Dylan's phone pings. As for Brenner's, that's unknown of because of the 7-day period, with Brenner's phone being an old flip one. It only stores data or so for 7 days, and then after that, it deletes it, it goes away. Kind of like how with Dylan's truck, once you start driving it, the previous data mileage is wiped with time. So with that, you know, it's unfortunate, right? It is, because two of the most critical pieces of evidence, and arguably speaking, both of them could have been prevented from being lost, right? You'll think of it like this. And I just want to bring this up right now because we might as well whilst we're here. Brenner's phone data, if it was checked within that 7-day period, the police actually got on board quick enough, then possibly they may have been able to find where Brenner was, and if it matched with Dylan's phone pings, right? It could have suggested that he was in possession of Dylan's phone at a certain point, such as the pond. But there isn't that evidence no more to back it up. So that's unfortunate. But then again, with the LE and obviously how they've handled things and delayed arresting Brenner immediately, apprehending him, they wouldn't have checked his phone and they wouldn't have cared to. But if they were more proactive, they could have got a hold of the phone, they could have looked at the data quickly, recorded it, and then it would have been fine. As for the vehicle and the data with that, breaking into it wasn't exactly a practical thing, and supposedly it's Justin Rounds that did it and not Candice, but Candice was present. In a way, it kind of makes more sense, a male breaking into the window. I know some people might get a bit bitchy or moany about that. I don't know how to describe it or explain, but it just seems to make more sense, someone like Justin doing it, because he seems more of a physical person, whereas Candice is more of a verbal person. Does that make sense? It might be different in other situations, but that's how I see it in this case with these people. The breaking in part wasn't exactly practical, but the data would have still remained. The only reason why the data was lost is when they started driving it. So that previous mileage done, 100 miles, is wiped once you start moving on and driving, because then it starts recording the newer data. So they should have just kept the vehicle as it was. But I think Candice Cooley has shifted the blame onto the LE, because it was supposedly the LE that gave them the green light to go ahead and do whatever needs to be done. So like, yeah, you can move the vehicle if you want. Yeah, you can drive it back. So it's like that authority giving permission to Candice or Justin or whoever to then move the vehicle, and then which led to data loss, which they weren't aware of. So unfortunate, right? But we're trying to focus with what we do have, and that is Dylan's phone pings. And I said, for the really definitive timeline of every single phone ping, that doesn't seem to be available. Even the more established channels like the Mob Crew, they've done their phone pings like I've done mine, but he wasn't criticised, I was. Bit of an imbalance there, right? Typical humans. But that aside, what I want to try and do is look at it from another way. Another person previously touched upon it, said, oh, it could have been because of this, and that's how the phone got about and Brenner was in possession of it, technically speaking. And I can kind of back that idea up with a previous idea I came up with, the whole phoning Brenner situation, because I just want to mention this now before we forget, so make sure you are listening, okay? So forget about the most recent interview or two where Candice was referring to Dylan being at the gate and then phoning the grandmother about the gate being locked, and then possibly phoning Brenner afterwards or before that, depending which order it followed in, because that's misinformation in its own self, about maybe, oh yeah, calling Brenner, hey, the gate's locked, can you unlock it for me? We don't fully know exactly, because, there's no phone records or voice messages we can look at to see what it was exactly about, the actual call, and Brenner hasn't said anything either. But you just put that all aside, because let's just remember in a past interview when Candice Cooley brought it up about Dylan going to the gate and making a call to Brenner. Well, actually, no, it was even before the whole gate situation. She just said that Dylan called Brenner probably to get a ride back. And it's like, well, it makes sense. It's possible. It's just like a simple favour. If Dylan's taken his truck down, what's he got to get back? Probably nothing. He would walk the 5 miles. If the weather's not so great or Dylan's not in a good mood, you might not want to walk that distance. So instead, get Brenner to drive him back. It's a simple request, right? And it may have happened something like that in the past, and that's what Dylan was hoping for once again, but Brenner didn't answer this time, maybe because he was in a mood, and then it might have transitioned onto the gate situation and arguments down there. But do you see what I'm saying? And this is what I mean, where it might not sit well with people, because people might say, watching right now, yeah, but have you not heard what Candice has said? That Dylan, what the grandmother said, that Dylan talked to her about the whole gate situation, it being locked, and that probably can be inferred from Dylan trying to call Brenner specifically about the gate being opened by him, getting the locks, because the locks have changed, and it's got nothing to do with Dylan wanting to be picked up, well, dropped off back home in Brenner's vehicle. But look, there's been so much misinformation, switching and changing, you can't help but take into account all these other differing alternative theories, ideas, concepts. And people can say, well, listen to this now, you know, we've heard this now, have you not heard about that? And it's like, yeah, I've heard, but is it even true? Because so much has switched and changed every single time. You know, you might as well start coming up with your own ideas, regardless of what other people think, because it's not exactly harming the case, because some of the key people have already harmed it enough already. So now it's just about rebuilding it into pieces, into like grouping it together to make sense of things, right? So that's what we're going to be doing. And that's how it ties in with the phone ping. It'll make more sense as we do like a deconstruction, or should I say a reconstruction of how events went down with the phone pings and their markers too. So now let's move on to Google Earth and talk it through. So here we are on the Google Earth maps. We zoom in, you'll be familiar with these markers. If you're not and new to the video, make sure to check my previous one out as I fully explain what's what, okay? There should be a link down below, I guess. So where do we start? Well, to tell the story of how the events, how the day could have unfolded, arguably down here, Dylan at his camper. What we need to understand, and Candice Cooley has said it several times now, but you can still contest it if you wish to, that Dylan did not live in his camper, hence why it explains the mess inside, and he moved around. Now, I'm still under the impression that Dylan seeding late at night on Friday, he then went inside of his camper and slept. If I'm wrong, or if you think something different, or if you have differing information, feel free to list it down below in the live chat or / and the comment section, so then we can compare and contrast, right? I'll just tell you the story based off my opinion, my thoughts, this whole concept, and as well from what I have previously heard of, okay, to tell the story. Dylan wakes up at whatever time, most definitely early. It could be 5 o'clock, it could be 6 o'clock, right? Maybe 6 o'clock makes a bit more sense. And as he wakes up, gets out of his trailer, presumably his grain truck is parked somewhere around here. It would make sense, because if he's been doing seeding in his field nearby, then, you know, that's how you get the seeds and that's where they come from. Now, I know some people have already questioned the whole farming process late at night. Is it practical? And what sort of machinery would be using in the dark, right? Questions around that. And I understand. I mean, if Dylan does his things his own way, and there might be quite of a contrast compared to how other people do it, then but that's just Dylan. You just got to take that in mind. As for the actual location of the seeding, I'm going to guess, is it round here where you see the track marks and the weird patterns in the ground? I'm just guessing, okay, but it's around this area where the seeding is. People have also said how many seeds were in the grain truck, right? Was it a full load? How much was used? I don't know. I can't answer that, but it's still worth questioning, right? So, to tell a story, Dylan gets in his grain truck and then he reverses out and gets onto the main dirt road. As you can see, the orange line. The orange line is the main road Dylan possibly and most likely drove down in the grain truck, coming all the way down here, eventually reaching Sun Tunnels, which is on the left, as you see that blue little symbol. Once getting to this crossroad, either cutting across or turning right at this point here, following the orange marker all the way down to the first phone ping and red marker key location, which is the gate. Now, from looking at photos beforehand, maybe I can do a standalone video if necessary. The gate and the fence surrounding the area, as you can roughly see, I think it's further on the actual fencing, but at a certain point, the reason why this gate is here is mainly to prevent the horse from escaping, because Brenner had one in the grain shed or nearby. I still contest that idea, because before Brenner actually lived on this land and before the horse supposedly existed in 2013, the grain shed already had a perimeter fence and possible gate as well. So it's not changed. So you can leave your thoughts about that. But yeah, more to do with the story. Dylan gets to this point, which is the gate, most likely locked. He doesn't have a key for it. The way Candice coolly worded it was 1 year ago, Dylan did have a key for the gate, but then ever since in 2022 at some point, Brenner supposedly changed the lock. Could be for numerous reasons, to prevent other people from getting in, being awkward towards Dylan because of a hatred building or a form of jealousy, a grudge, could be anything, as you know. So that led to Dylan obviously getting out his vehicle possibly, or even sitting inside and then ringing people up. Now, depending which order it was in, could be Brenner, could be Karen first. Who knows what order, because that seems to differentiate. Probably Brenner, most likely, right? So Dylan may phone up Brenner and say, hey, can you unlock the gate for me? I need to get in quick. A grain truck, the rain. There's a problem, right? Oh, and also, whilst you're at it, insert the new theory. When I've done my work for today, and when I've parked my grain truck in the grain shed and all loose ends have been tied up, Brenner, can you drive me back possibly? Because I don't really want to walk it today because of the weather, or I'm just feeling a bit tired. I'm feeling fatigued from the night before with all the seeding on Friday night at 11:30 p.m. I'm knackered, I'm worn out. It's time to have a little bit of a break, maybe go round to Justin Round's house or Candice Cooley's, because that's what I normally do over a weekend, or when there's signs of rain and when there's no farm work to do at the point in time because of the weather, and because I'm also tired. I just need to relax. I need to get away. So Brenner, could you possibly give me a ride back? I'd appreciate it. But obviously there was no answer at that point. So you kind of get how that could have played out, right? I've added in the factor of the farming the night before, Dylan being tired, because I know viewers did bring that point up, the condition and state of Dylan, whether it be when Dylan was taken out or just before it. There might have been certain mindsets going on, right, with Dylan. You can be tired if you do stuff late at night. I mean, look at the Shack Lady, completely different, but the Shack Lady covering the Dylan Rounds case, but mainly in recent time, mainly drama and all the complaining and all kinds of wild stuff going on. And the Shack Lady is drained, tired, exhausted, because she's doing it for like 11, 12 hours and doing it quite close to each other. She said she's not really eating. She's kind of sleeping. She needs to take this and that for sleeping, like all kinds of chaos going on. So you can apply that to Dylan. Dylan doing his thing late on at night, hard work, whether it be physical, mental, both, etc. So you get the idea. So that's why I tied it in with this concept and idea, right? So depending what happens next from this point, bear in mind 6:51 a.m. at this location when Dylan then calls Karen, which is Dylan's grandmother, okay? So either Brenner comes down or Dylan has to go down to Brenner and notify him. Who knows which order it exactly followed in, but let's just say Dylan did get down here somehow, got to the grain shed, and whether it be before or after, popped in at Jim's possibly and said, hey Jim, okay, just got to do some things, got to park the grain truck in the shed. Is it possible if you give me a ride back, maybe? Is that possible? And maybe Brenner agrees. Understandably, it would probably be hard to imagine if Brenner is awkward or he's lazy, he's a slob, he has it in for Dylan. Is he really going to do Dylan a favour? I mean, there's a there's a slightly dark way of looking at it, okay, and we'll transition onto that very shortly. So Dylan then carries on, whatever the decision is at the time. Dylan obviously parks the grain truck in the shed, providing he's still wearing the boots, right? I mean, the only way, I'm going to word it like this, so you make sure you understand what I say. If people didn't know about the DNA on Dylan's boots being linked with Brenner, and Brenner said nothing about moving the boots, you could have originally assumed that maybe Dylan may have took the boots off if he's done for the day, or if the boots are knackered, or he just has no use for them for the rest of the day, so he just places them here or places them over there. And if he's going to get picked up by Brenner, then you might not really have to wear shoes when you're in the car, and you're not going to be walking all the way back, are you? So it doesn't matter if you're wearing shoes or not because you're in a moving vehicle. So that's one way you could have interpreted it at the time, okay? Though what we've heard recently about the DNA, that Brenner did pick up the boots, take him to his trailer, and then to the dirt mound over here, you know, that tells a different story, and that seems to be more reinforced with actual evidence, okay? So did you see what I clearly did then? I specifically said that you could have internalized it, interpreted it in a different story if you didn't know the current information. Though with the current information, it seems more valid. You can look into it more because there seems to be more evidence. But there will always be some people out there that will say, what evidence? Where is it? Have you actually seen it yourself? No, didn't think so. You just heard it from Candice. So you see that it's a three-way. It's a threesome, right? 3 different versions, right? So I just wanted to include all that. Additionally, as for this dirt mound, there's actually questioning with it. And the reason why I say that is because from what we've heard in a recent news report, it was saying Dylan's boots were found on top, right on top of the dirt mound. So it's like on top of a mountain, you'd literally see him stood up. Though it's been worded most of the time previously by Candice, by others, by YouTubers, etc., as chucked near to the dirt mound. Right, so on the ground floor. That's a bit odd, right? Especially Mark Ortiz, because he has covered the case and looked into it previously, so I don't know what is going on there, but yeah, that's just how it's gone. So, referring back to the story with what I've just mentioned there with the conditions, I'm going to interpret it as Dylan finished what he needed to do. He's still wearing his boots because it's a normal thing. Goes down to Jim's trailer because maybe it's time, and is like, right, can we go now? I'm ready, I'm done. And Brenner might be like, yeah, okay, whatever. Before we continue, I just want to make sense of things. This location was the second phone ping after 6:51 a.m. So I don't know the exact time of the second phone ping, but it's after 6:51, okay? And it makes sense. This is probably still Dylan, if he's gone to the grain shed directly for the grain truck to be parked inside of it, right? That bit makes sense. So Jim gets out his trailer. Jim's got his own vehicle, as we've seen, and we've seen in 2019 imagery at his place in Montello, former place of living, which burnt down a year ago or two. The drive down that way, most likely, right? I think what you got to take in mind, and I've not been informed or heard of it, is there any double pings? You know, it's okay seeing the phone ping at the gate saying 6:51 a.m, but is there another phone ping in the same spot at a later time to explain whether he came back or forth? You know what I'm saying? I don't know personally, but I think it would be important to know. So you kind of understand how many times they went back and forth, right? But yeah, Brenner may be driving Dylan down this road. And what happens? What ultimately happens if that was the case? What's the atmosphere like? Is it tense? Is it quiet? Is it awkward? I don't know because I wasn't there. But you got to take in mind, if the likes of Brenner and Dylan spent, what was it, 1 month or 3 months at a motel close together, and there was no killing, no hurting, nothing then in small spaces or when they're close together, it's not so bad after all. And when I say close together, I don't mean in a weird way. I just mean like in proximity. But what we must understand is the way Candice worded it, and this is yet another bit of misinformation, okay? So back in the past, the way Candice worded it was Dylan and Brenner at a certain point were doing custom farming, something like that, working for someone else in a different spot, and they were at a motel. That's what she said, at a motel. Fast forward to a later interview, maybe a month on or so, and Candice then says, oh yeah, no, Brenner and Dylan, they were in my backyard in a trailer. I mean, that's a big difference between staying at a motel somewhere else where you've got to pay as well, and then living in the backyard of your mum's. You know, it just, there's a big contrast. Once again, misinformation. Did anyone else pick up on that in the past? Because you would have seen some of my videos where I was trying to make sense of it, saying, right, well, what motel? Was it Wendover? Because that's the closest place, right? That's where they could have stayed at. That is the catalyst. That is the beginning. That is the causation of all those dodgy motel analysis videos. That's where it all came from. That was the beginning. If it wasn't for Candice and her misinformation back then those videos about the motels would never have existed, right? So, that's one way to take it in. Because I looked at Wendover and West Wendover, and then other people said, no, Brenner and Dylan were in a trailer in Montello. And I'm like, what? What's going on here? And then Candy says, no, not a motel. It was a trailer at my place. And it's like, well, you're not in Montello, so you're elsewhere. You see? Do you see? Crazy. But yeah, time back to this story. Dylan Brenner in the vehicle, driving down. Is there a possibility that Dylan was taken out whilst he was in the vehicle? Is that possible? Would it have happened on this road? Or could it have happened once they finally got to the spot? Possibly. Let's just use that concept for now. Driving all the way down, back to Dylan's place, right? And then once they got here, parked up, do you think Brenner just got on, drove back to his camper just like that, and then, oh yeah, bye, goodbye, that's it? How does that explain the phone ping though? Well, that can partially be explained shortly, but let's just say that Dylan was taken out here and he was just left on the ground, or maybe he was dragged near to the vehicle. I don't know how you would interpret it. I'm not sure the exact method. Whether it was an ambush or a confrontation, you got to still take in mind the boots with blood on. So the way I'm gonna word it, and this section of the video is open to different interpretations. Okay, I'll list mine first of all. Okay, so there's a possibility that maybe when Dylan got out the vehicle, Brenner may have had some unfinished business, right? Would that be to do with money? You could have said that, but because Dylan didn't have any money on him, then it's kind of pointless. And I don't know if Brenner has seen Dylan with money before, so I don't think there would be need for that, unless Brenner was more interested in the gun of Dylan's. But then again, did Brenner ever see Dylan's gun? Probably not, because Dylan didn't seem to carry it around from what Candice coolly said. So I don't think there would have been a motive behind that. So the only other motive I could think of with the whole snapping concept would be maybe Dylan walked off whilst Brenner was still having a discussion, and it's like, excuse me, I'm not finished talking with you. I need to talk about that gate situation, or no, I need to talk to you about this or that because we've not discussed it yet. And what are you doing walking away from me? How dare you? You know, and then that jealousy within, that power dynamic, that lack of respect, you know, between different ages, and Dylan in a rush, possibly getting on with things because of the whole rain situation and maybe contacting family as well. There's a possibility that Dylan didn't have time to sit around and talk, and Brenner's in his truck and thinking, wow, how rude, I'm going to teach him a lesson. He gets out his vehicle and confronts Dylan, follows after him on this patch of land. And then they have a little bit of an argument, confrontation, and then Brenner snaps. Because it's heat of the moment, there might already be some kind of tension. Brenner takes Dylan out, Dylan falls to the floor, maybe he hits his head. You know, maybe it's one of those methods. Maybe the blood droplet on the boot is because Brenner punched Dylan in the face, broke his nose, which led to nosebleed, and there's a portion of that landed on the foot, possibly the shoe, but only on one. And then what happens from there, if that was the case? Did Brenner suddenly start thinking, right, I need to dispose of him? Or was he in shock? Was it meant to happen? Because this is what I mean. You know, whether it's happened here, the grain shed, wherever, something has obviously happened, right? And I just want to throw this question in right now. So, with the whole snap situation, most people seem to agree that's the case with Brenner. Do you think if Brenner was the one responsible and it was because Brenner snapped, which led to Dylan getting hurt and maybe killed on the spot, once Dylan became unconscious, do you think that Brenner snapped out of that rage and then he realised what he's done? Do you think he was shocked? Do you think he was like regretting it? Or do you think he was still in that zone, the adrenaline running, the intensity, and he didn't care? Which one do you think? I want to know, because that can change the course of how things played out, because you've got to take in mind, yes, it may have happened and most likely did on the 28th, but the actual disposing could have occurred on the 29th, because there's not much talked about still to this day. Candice Cooley hasn't mentioned much. Justin Rounds hasn't mentioned much. YouTubers haven't mentioned much, but I have questioned the 29th. It's okay saying the 30th, it's okay saying June the 6th, it's okay saying June the 18th, June the 16th, etc., etc. But, you know, what about the 29th of May? Was Brenner still zoned in? Or did his rage stop by then? And then he was desperately trying to dispose of Dylan. That's what we've got to try and understand. Now, in terms of the actual phone ping situation, because I don't know the times or the exact dates, I assume they all occurred in the same day with the phone pings, and the way it's been worded by Candice Cooley as well. If you think different, if you know different, make sure to correct it down below, okay? Because that'd be appreciated. But basing it off from what I know, as I said, and how it's been worded, I assume the phone situation occurred all in one day, right? I also think that before Dylan was taken out, there's a possibility under these circumstances that when Dylan got out of Brenner's truck, Dylan's phone might have slipped out his pocket, right? It's a normal thing to happen. It's happened with me. I'm sure it's happened with many other people at any point, any time, etc. It just happens, right? And if Dylan's in a rush, he forgets things or he leaves stuff on the side like food in his trailer, I'm sure that could have been an easy mistake with his phone. He gets out, phone slips out on the seat or in the footwell. He walks to his trailer. Brenner might notice, he might not. Let's say Brenner doesn't even know. Brenner gets out of his truck, confronts Dylan, takes him out, and then what exactly happens there? Does Brenner pick Dylan up, puts him back in his own truck, or puts him in Dylan's truck from there on? Well, Dylan's truck seems to have been used. There's been track marks which link to his vehicle. So that could still tie in with that. As for the phone, the way I would internalize it, if we just pause and isolate the whole what happens next with Dylan specifically, with Brenner at a certain point in time, whether it be on the spot, rushing back to his trailer to get a hold of bin bags or some kind of equipment to dispose of Dylan, or trying to reach out to Don Hately. I don't know exactly, but let's just isolate certain points. And Brenner gets back into his truck, rushes back possibly to his trailer, driving up here. This may explain the double phone ping in certain areas. As I said, if we knew every single phone ping, even the repeated reoccurring locations at a different time, that could explain to whether it was Dylan or Brenner or both returning back to a certain spot, right? You understand what I'm saying? So Brenner drives back to here. The gate's probably unlocked, or if it's locked, it doesn't really matter because Brenner does have access. Gets back to here, and this should explain the fourth phone ping, right? If I didn't quite mention the third phone ping, it's what I was talking about just before that, where Brenner brought Dylan back home here, and then Dylan got out of the vehicle, but the phone ping pinged in this location, and it could have still been in Brenner's vehicle if it fell out of Dylan's pocket, okay? And then the fourth one being all the way back at Brenner's trailer. It's like, well, originally that's what the confusion was. If it was Dylan in possession of his phone, it makes sense going up to the grain shed and then going back to his place of living. That all makes sense. But then coming all the way back to Jim's trailer again, why does he need to go back? He's done what he needed to do for the day. Grain truck in grain shed. Why do you need to go back to the place afterwards and go to Jim's trailer? That's what the confusion was. But it makes alternative sense now if Brenner took Dylan back, gave him a ride, right? And then as Brenner was coming back to his own trailer, and Dylan's phone is accidentally left inside of Brenner's vehicle, that explains why the phone pinged back here. And then at some point on the spot, whether it be now or after disposing of Dylan or returning back, who knows, at a certain point, with this being the fourth phone ping, Brenner must have known. He must have, right? Unless there's yet another reoccurring repeated phone ping in the same location back at Dylan's, which I've not heard of, then that could explain that Brenner drove all the way back to Dylan's and then realised the phone of Dylan's was inside his vehicle. But I've not seen those extra phone pings. This is the fourth one. The fifth one is over here, right? This one over here, which is the pond. So the way I see it, or how it could be interpreted, is once Brenner gets back to his trailer, he realises Dylan's phone is there, and it's like, right, shit, I need to get rid of it. I need to dispose of that first. Because obviously, there was some questions with people thinking, what came first, the phone being dumped or Dylan's body? In this situation, maybe it was the phone. So Brenner possibly goes the back way, this green line there, because that's the way Candice Cooley worded it. It followed the back road route. Do you agree with that, or do you think that's yet another lie? It could switch and change at a certain point. Okay. Turn in here. Coming down this way to the wash area. Right. Parking up. Kind of like that vehicle is. I don't know who that vehicle is. This is 2019. Wouldn't it be odd if this was Brenner's vehicle indirectly caught on camera, even though it was at a different point? But yeah, came to this point, went in, and then wherever the pond is, disposed of the phone. And then he got back in his vehicle, right? and drove all the way back, maybe the same exact way, who knows, all the way back to here. And then Brenner may have done something else from there on, because at this point there's no more phone pings, so we wouldn't know. And as I just want to bring back in, very important point, just like how I said at the start of this video, if we had Brenner's phone pings, if that data was collected before the 7-day expiry of that data being lost, then we could have been able to reinforce this concept, this theory, what I've come up with so far, right? It might have fully supported the idea, or it might have supported the an alternative idea. Who knows? But it's such a mess, this case, that it's open to interpretation, right? It's the best one can do. So at this point, Brenner could have done anything, right? He might have gone to Don Haley's. He might have asked about. He might have said, hey, right, you know, whilst I'm at this barbecue, 2:30 p.m. or so, right, can you help me? You know, you need to help me dispose of Dylan. I've done something very foolish. I've done something very silly. Oh, man. And I don't think Brenner would be too much in a rush in a way, because he kept certain items supposedly on him, and then that possibly led to him at a later point returning them back, and yet he could have done them immediately, but he chose not to. He kept a hold of them. So originally he was under, presumably, the idea that there wouldn't be a strong presence of people because it's a ghost town. Not many people goes there. That's why Brenner likes it the way it is. So he doesn't feel the need of doing things immediate, possibly, because he doesn't think there's as much of a rush if you're in a more populated place. And it explains the same with Dylan. Dylan Round's not locking his vehicle because of the area they're in. But is there a possibility that Dylan would lock his vehicle if he went down to Wendover, Elko, or Montello, right? Possibly, right? So, do you want me to continue with the concept or idea of what happened next? I'll briefly do it, right? It's not as clean. But yeah. As for this yellow line, this was originally from the previous video, so it doesn't apply in this one. Okay, so you don't have to focus on that. So at this point, when the phone pings are non-existent and Brenner is unknown of, Brenner could have returned back all the way to Dylan's place of living. And then at what point did Brenner think, right, I'll put Dylan in the back or inside of my truck, or should I put him on my horse, as Candy's possibly suggested, or should I put him in Dylan's own vehicle to make it seem less suspicious? Possibly. It seems like there was more altering of Dylan's vehicle than other people's that were present and equipment. So, you know, kind of similar to I've explained, Dylan is put into his own truck, his own vehicle, seat adjusted, things turned on, all-wheel drive, so Brenner could actually drive it. I mean, one thing that would be worth talking about, and I don't think it has been, is what about the DNA of Brenner's own vehicle? What can you infer from that? You know, has it been used anywhere else? Aside from, you know, Brenner's DNA on the steering wheel, the gear and all that, has Brenner's vehicle been power washed? Has Brenner's vehicle got any mud on it, like near the wheel, kind of like Dylan's, or not? Is it cleaner? Has it been used less? That's what we've got to try and understand, right? Considering that Dylan's vehicle was returned back and power washed, Brenner would still have had a vehicle to get back to his place of living after the whole job was done. So there was always a vehicle available at hand, whether it's coming or going. So Brenner didn't have to walk back because he couldn't have done it. It wouldn't have been possible. So I still think that, you know, Brenner may have used Dylan's vehicle because of the mud on it and the mileage. The possible mileage, right? But as I said about Brenner's vehicle, did anyone measure the distance from Brenner's own vehicle inside, the distance of Brenner's seat, where it's situated, and how far away it's from Brenner's steering wheel. And is Brenner's vehicle set to all-wheel drive? Yes or no? If Brenner's vehicle and Brenner's seat is in the same position and is the same distance from the steering wheel as seen in Dylan Round's vehicle, altered with, then it could explain to that Brenner was the one behind the wheel if the seat's in the same position, right? Because originally it wasn't in Dylan's case. Dylan is taller than Brenner. Dylan is lighter as well. Dylan is also aware that all-wheel drive doesn't work, so Dylan would have had a certain setup with his vehicle, his F-150. Brenner wouldn't have been aware of some of the details with Dylan, I'm assuming, like all-wheel drive. Okay, so important point. I don't know if I'll do it as a poll. I'll just do it as a poll, like a rough one, just so you see it on the screen, because I think that's an important point about Brenner's vehicle, about the distance of the seat being adjusted from the steering wheel, and does it compare to Dylan's seat being moved closer, right? Very important. So you got to take in mind that the gun as well was taken previously, originally. The phone already disposed of, let's just say. And I don't want to talk too much because I have done a video on this, so I'll just do it very briefly, okay? Brenner gets into Dylan's truck, alters with it so it fits his driving style. Dylan's inside, and then Brenner takes Dylan somewhere, and there's different possible ideas. You know, the current conversation is of the wash, which is here. Now, I don't know how long the wash goes on for. It seems to disperse down here, right? It's been described as a drainage thing, so it doesn't hold water over time, especially when it's dry. So who knows exactly where in the wash? I brought the idea back at the waterhole down here, because this is an actual road that goes into the wash. So driving down into the wash, maybe turning right and then driving down the wash, it has been done before. Search and Rescue even did it post Dylan's disappearance because of the track marks, right? So it can be done. And supposedly it's somewhat dry, but there might still be a bit of dampness somewhere, or, you know, mud must have got onto it somehow in some way, right? And then Dylan was disposed of down here. Now the question I have is, what? Buried in the ground? Because that's really the only way, right? If it was full of water and Dylan was weighted down, pushed in, he's weighted down to the bottom, he's kind of concealed, right? And slash if there's a water, or there's a flow of it, there's a current and it's moving, it might push Dylan along and push his body down the wash further out. If there is rubble, if there is debris, there is vegetation, there's sticks, twigs collected somewhere, almost like a dam type of structure, might be pushed along with the water, which then intertwines and ravels and gathers up with Dylan, so it kind of conceals him and buries him somewhere. That's another idea. But if there's no water and it's not rained and the wash is dry, then how can Dylan be hidden there? Surely then you'd have to dig into the ground and then bury him in it and then fill it up. That's the only way I can see it if Dylan was taken to the wash. You know, I can understand the pond situation originally, not that it did happen, but it could have happened. The pond regularly has water. There doesn't seem to be any drainage. If it was deep enough, then Dylan could have been weighted down and concealed underneath the water at the depth. But obviously, it's not deep enough, so it's not possible. And I guess Brenner would already know. But the wash itself is, no matter how deep it is, you know, even if it was chucked off like the edge of a mountain, you'd see a person lying down at the bottom on the ground, right? Unless they were concealed in some way. So do any of you know how Dylan could be concealed in the wash if it didn't rain? Was he literally buried in the ground in the wash? Yes or no? I'll do a poll briefly, okay? I want to see your thoughts. Now, if it's not because of that, very quickly, as I've briefly mentioned before, somewhere over here, there is a place called Patterson's Pass. Boom, we found it. There is a road down here which does connect into Lucin, as you can see. Patterson Pass Spring. You go all the way up here, and then obviously you drive all the way down, and then it goes right into Montello, and then possibly turning right towards Bald Eagle Mountain, which has a range of different mines and mine shafts as displayed by Lance and Ty in recent time when exploring. You know, you got the mine there. That's just an example of one, and several others scattered about. And there is roads which are accessible. So someone like Brenner, if he's lazy, he can't be bothered, look, he's got the option to just drive there, so it's not going to require much effort. As for the whole taking Dylan into a mine, that's probably not practical because the mines are tight, small, narrow. Brenner will probably get stuck. You know, the horse will have to come along and kick him up the bottom to free him. So it probably is more likely a mine shaft. Dylan just chucked in, rolled in, booted in. You know what I'm saying? Very straightforward, pretty simple, pretty possible, right? But obviously Dylan has not been found yet to prove that idea, but that's just another possible spot, right? Now, as for Ty and Lance, we'll move on to them next, okay? But you get the idea, don't you, about this whole phone ping situation. It would be much better if we knew of Brenner's phone pings, because then that could tie in with this theory, as I mentioned today, or it could go against it and reinforce another thing. But as I said, I'm only working with what I have, okay? So leave your thoughts down below to what you think about this concept. So yeah, moving on to Ty and Lance. From the recent video addressing Candice Cooley's lies, as it was titled, Lance announced that he'll be continuing searching for Dylan, but with Kimber. And there was no word of Ty being involved. I don't know what's happened, if there's been a disagreement, a falling out, I'm not sure. If any of you know, feel free to explain in the chat what's happened with Ty. I heard a story about Ty was returning back to his home or his farm, his homestead, whatever you want to call it, just recently, and found that the door was kicked in. Not much was robbed, but someone's been inside. Who could it be? It could be a resident of Montello. It could be someone like Chase Venstra, but not actually Chase Venstra. You get what I'm saying? Imagine it was Robert Avalos. That'd be a bit of a twist, wouldn't it? So, has that event impacted Ty? Has it impacted Ty that he doesn't want to go out searching for Dylan anymore because he thinks it's a threat, it's a warning? Is it, like, the other question I have, who's that other person? Phyllis. Is that person called Phyllis? Was Phyllis living and present in that building which was ransacked, or you know, someone stormed the place, someone made an entry with force? Was Phyllis present? Yes or no? Or was she elsewhere? I don't know. Could that have worried Ty? So now Ty is being a bit more cautious and protective. Is it that? Or has it got something to do with Candice Cooley? Has it got anything to do with pancakes? Has it got anything to do with the lie detector test that Ty is supposed to be doing at some point? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how things play out, but it just seems like something's gone on. And if you know, feel free to list it down below if you want to, okay? So that's kind of interesting. Now, as the interesting thing, what I noticed with that video, that Lance said that, I think someone asked a question in the chat at the time and then Lance responded, and it was to do with, you know, has Justin Rounds informed Ty and Lance to stop searching? Because originally Ty and Lance were the ones saying that Justin was, you know, encouraging them and being thankful for doing what they do. And then Candice Cooley has been unaware all this time, supposedly. And in the Heavy D interview, I think it was, which was like a week or two ago, Candice said, No, no, it wouldn't have been the Heavy D one because Justin Rounds was present. It was the Doug. It was No Thanks interview, the last one that was done, and Candice said, "Oh, well, I don't know about Justin Rounds and his thoughts. If he wants them to still continue, I'll have a word with him and then get back from there." There's not been an answer since because there's not been an interview, so who knows? There has been a discussion. I don't know if Justin Rounds still encourages Tynelands to explore out there or if he's changed his mind now. We've known with Candice Cooley for a bit, it's kind of been on and off. Welcome the public, then push them away. Welcome the public, push them away. Welcome the police, push them away. Welcome the police, push them away. And now, before winter, it's we've got our own private groups in now, push the general public away again so there's no evidence ruined. We see that pattern, back, forth, just like with the information. So you can't help but think, right? So, as referring back to Lance answering the question about Candice Cooley and Justin Rounds, whether they encourage it or not, Lance did reply with saying, well, if Justin Rounds or Candice, whether it be one or both, say to stop searching, I'm going to keep on searching because you can't stop me. It's not illegal what I'm doing. I'm just looking for someone. Anyone can do that. That's what Lance said. Now that's a change of behaviour because in the past, when Lance was keeping to himself and when Lance or Ty or both appeared on, let's say, Zav Girl's interview at some point, and then maybe some others, basically Lance said in a softly spoken voice that we're just doing our thing, we're trying to help the community, that's all we're doing. Justin has, thanked us for what we're doing, so we're going to keep on continuing. If at any point they tell us to stop, we will. And look at the situation now. No, if they tell me to stop, I'm going to carry on searching. Is that pure determination and pure passion trying to look for Dylan? Or is it partially being awkward now, not respecting the family's wishes because the family disrespected him recently with the whole criticisms about the bone in the bags? You see how things transition is the thing. And it applies in the Dylan Rounds case. Overall, the community itself, you'll get certain groups, certain channels, certain people directly involved or not in the Dylan Rounds case. They may respect one another, but then something happens which ends up changing or removing that respect, and then it leads to certain behaviour which wasn't going to be displayed but now is displayed, and that's like what we're seeing with Lance. I don't know what Ty thinks of it or what happens next. Could it lead to some kind of legal conflict? It gets very messy, although it's all about Dylan, and it should be. Now it starts turning into turf wars, standoffs, groups battling one another, families at each other's throats, going through courts, going through this and that. Ooh, could it get very nasty? I don't know. Do you think it could get very nasty between certain families? Some people are more passionate. Some people are more passionate and determined finding Dylan than other people aren't, and they might be the family, but then they've got their own procedure, but then at the same time they keep switching and changing, and you've got these other people that are switching and changing. What the hell's going on? What's going to happen next? I don't know. I guess we'll find out, won't we? Do I think it'll be a good thing? No. I feel something bad will happen. I don't know to what extent, but I still feel at some point in this case as well, there will be a twist. There will be a dark twist at some point. That's all I'll say, because that's all I know. That's all I sense. That's just what I sense, right? We'll see what happens, okay? That's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Leave your thoughts down below, and good night.